OLLO Audio has been making hand-built professional headphones for several years. This company has an ethos I fully embrace: simplicity in design, good build quality, and easy component replacement if something should eventually break. That's a combination very few headphone manufacturers integrate. I've owned all of OLLO Audio's headphones thus far. I found all of them quite neutral, well-tuned examples of workhorse headphones that could be used for any use scenario. Now the company has released their newest headphone, the X1. This is their most expensive headphone to date, nearly $600. They've sold out all of their batches and are taking pre-orders for the next one due to ship in April. Let's see what the X1 can offer. If you've seen one OLLO headphone, you've basically got a sense of how the rest will fit and feel. The company has an overarching design philosophy. They use metal and wood and leather throughout the construction. The X1 is pretty much the same size, weight, and aesthetics as the prior headphones. The closed-back S4R and the open-back S5X, for example, might easily be mistaken for the X1 from an angle. All the headphones use the same cabling. They are pre-wired for balanced input if you want. They have very similar headband structure. The ear cups swivel 360 degrees but offer only minimal horizontal adjustment, and this can be problematic if your face doesn't fall into the general parameters designed for the X1. This is an issue I've talked about before when I reviewed of OLLO's other headphones. The ear pads are circular and moderately padded. There's nothing proprietary about them, so if you want to swap them for alternatives, you easily can. In my experience, however, the X1's ear pads are pretty good. They were comfortable for long sessions up to 3 hours and provided plenty of cushion for me. And in fact, the ear holes were so generous for me that they sat completely around my average-sized ears. The clamping force is quite modest as well. The HD6XX, for example, has a pretty tight clamp. The Philips SHP 9500 and 9600 have pretty light clamps. But I'd put the X1 a step below the HD6XX in terms of clamping force, if you want to put it on that sort of extreme example spectrum. Your head shape and size will have a dramatic influence on how any headphone fits, so just keep that in mind. Every component on the X1 is user replaceable. You can order a replacement from OLLO directly and can do any maintenance at home. But if you want to send the headphones in for repair, OLLO continues to have one of the best warranties in the market: 5 years with a 90-day trial period. That's pretty good. Overall, the X1's build and fit are the same as across the other OLLO headphones. These are incredibly well made and unique. It is clear that OLLO Audio spent time thinking about the components long ago when they started making their headphones, and that care is finally paying off in dividends. They don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I don't think they have to. If there's one issue, it's the limited horizontal adjustment to the X1. That may or may not affect the end user depending on your head shape and size, and of course, personal preferences. I used the X1 for 2 months as one of my many headphones. I compared against the S5X and the S4R as well as against the Rode NTH100, all headphones that I found to be neutral and easy to listen to. I threw in the Avantone Planar for good measure to compare transients and clarity. I used my Army ADI2 DAC mostly, along with the Matrix Mini I Pro 3 and my Woo Audio WA7 for some of that tubey goodness. I naturally did some careful testing using my usual testing methodology with an A/B switch, using lossless audio tracks, volume matching, all the stuff I've talked about ad nauseum in my previous 500 videos. I also listened to the X1 casually. I watched movies, YouTube nonsense, and listened to a variety of music just for pleasure. I took the X1 on road trips, tossed them into my bag without any protective case as I commuted to work, and went through a very big house move where they were packed in with an assortment of other stuff and handled with less than gentle care. And after all that manhandling of these headphones, there's not a scratch on them, there's not even an idea that these headphones are going to break or creak or are just falling apart. And that's again testament to OLLO Audio's good construction practices. In short, OLLO Audio was very patient in letting me take my time with the X1, and I assure you I used that time to put this headphone through plenty of stuff. OLLO Audio says the X1 has a flat frequency response, and they mean neutral. They make that claim for all of their headphones, and in the past I've found that to be pretty true. Here, the X1 does indeed retain that neutral tuning, but it adds something I was not expecting. In the past, I've commented that OLLO's headphones have varying degrees of clarity and separation of frequencies. The S4R, for example, is less clear in the bass than the S4X or the S5X. During the S5X's review, I talked about how that headphone had the clearest bass of all the OLLO lineup and more clarity throughout the frequency range in general. The X1 takes the S5X's clarity and notches that up quite a bit. The entire frequency range from bass to treble has more of a separation and clarity on the X1 compared to any of the OLLO headphones. The bass on the X1 hits harder than the other OLLO headphones, but retains about the same amount of transients and clarity as the S5X. Drum strikes sound slightly more clear on the X1 than on the S5X. Low rumble is fairly obvious on the X1, about as much as on the S5X, but not as apparent as on the S4R or the NTH100, which kind of meld the sub-bass and mid-bass frequencies together. Compared to the Rode NTH100, by the way, the difference is obvious still. The X1 is simply clearer in bass response and has moderately faster transients. The Avantone Planar, of course, had the fastest transients and clarity in bass, but that's kind of bread and butter features for planar drivers. The Avantone Planar doesn't offer the depth and impact of dynamic drivers, and in that respect, the X1 has a more impactful bass response compared to the Planar. The other surprise for me is the X1's vocal clarity. Male and female vocalists shine through the mix, sit very close to the ear. The S5X makes vocals stand a little bit further back from the ear and present them slightly less clearly. The S4R has vocals about the same distance from the ear as the X1, but with noticeably less clarity when other elements are in the mix. Mid-centric clarity and separation is more obvious on the X1 than on the other OLLO headphones or the Rode NTH100. A large part of this is the accentuated grain that the X1 has compared to any of the other headphones I've talked about in this review so far. This is a pretty obvious departure from OLLO's previous headphones. That vocal grain is something you can notice in songs that have this detail kind of mixed in. For example, in Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This? On the other hand, the X1 does not accentuate vocal sibilants, which can be a far bigger problem. Sibilant spikes can make it really tough to listen to a track, and there are plenty of headphones designed to shove that kind of detail into your ears, such as the DT1990 and the HD560S. Luckily, none of the headphones in this review have a sibilance emphasis. Those S sounds roll off just before they become peaky or harsh on all of these. Multiple vocalists shine through on the X1, and it's not too different from what I experienced on the S5X. They're pretty similar in that respect. The S4R has the least separation, while the Rode NTH100 and the Avantone Planar kind of sit in the middle somewhere, with the Planar taking a little bit further ahead than the NTH100 with respect to vocal separation. Treble on the X1 is a bit clearer compared to the S5X. It is noticeably clearer compared to the NTH100, S4R, and the Avantone Planar. Brass and horns cut through the orchestral mixes on the X1, while they kind of vie for attention on the S4R and the NTH100. Soundstage and detail retrieval on the X1 is the greatest out of all the OLLO headphones I've listened to thus far, which is their entire lineup. The X1 soundstage is quite open, and I would compare it similarly to what I hear on my HD700. In other words, the soundstage on the X1 is considerably wider than on the HD6XX, but I wouldn't say quite as wide as on the hifi Manzandara. As for detail retrieval, the X1 can render minor details quite well. Sharp intakes of brass, creaking of wood, light thumping of a guitar, the gruffness in vocals, all of that comes out on the X1. I have a standardized subjective detail test I've done for many years. I use Kazuki's song New Light to count footsteps in the first 60 seconds. And using that test, the X1 rendered 10 to 11 clear footsteps. The S5X presented 9, The S4R gave me 8, the Avantone Planar rendered 11, and the NTH100 presented 9. OLLO Audio has a plugin for your DAW to calibrate the X1. You gotta register your headphone in order to be able to download this software, but that's not too difficult, is it? It's not unique to OLLO, but there are plugins that compensate for a variety of popular headphones. However, it is nice to see that they do have one specific for their headphones, so good job, OLLO. This, I think, is yet another example of OLLO Audio's concerted effort to support their products. When I take a big picture approach to the X1, I see a headphone that is an evolution of what came before. It is not revolutionary by any means, but very few headphones and audiophile products in general are revolutionary. The impressive part of the X1 is the build quality, easily replaceable parts, mostly flat tuning, and good warranty. That's a combination worth looking into, frankly. The X1 is not a boring sounding headphone. I mean, I could think of some Sony headphones made for production that really do sound boring, mostly because they don't really have any bass and they've had this mid-centric tuning designed for vocals and for dialogue. And that's not the X1. It has hard-hitting but still clear bass, present but not harsh vocals, and a marginally accentuated treble somewhere in the low to mid-treble area. It's not a warm-sounding headphone, it's not dark, and it's not analytical. You could easily use this headphone for general purpose as much as for specific applications in the professional field. The headphone is quite pricey at $600, and there are phenomenal options that are much cheaper. My current go-to neutral headphone is the Rode NTH100, and that headphone has a lot going for it for under $150. If you're on a budget and want a neutral headphone, I really do recommend the NTH100. If you want analytical, then I encourage you to look at one of Austrian Audio's varieties. If you want bassy, V-Moda has you covered. You see, there are brands which cater to a specific need. OLLO caters to those who want a balance of neutral sound, excellent build, and user-friendly maintenance. I think the X1 is another great step for this company. It has impressed me with each iteration of their product. The design they use might be getting a little bit long in the tooth, but it's still quite functional. And finally, I think the X1 is a fantastic headphone. Well worth a close look if you're in the market for a new professional headphone or one that just happens to have the qualities that OLLO Audio offers in the X1.